Hey everyone. Ready to go on a little journey with me? We're gonna dive deep into Metallica's Black Album.
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest albums, like,
Yeah,
ever, right?
it really is. It's the one that it felt like everyone had a copy back in the day. But before we get into the whole cultural phenomenon thing, let's set the stage a bit. It's 1991. Metallica's already got, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets under their belt.
They were thrash royalty at that point, no
Well,
question.
but then comes And Justice for All. And I remember even some hardcore fans. Even some of the diehards were like, "Ooh, this is a lot."
It was a dense album for sure,
Ah,
super complex musically,
right.
which, led to some of the criticisms, like people felt it was too long, too overstuffed. And then, of course, you had the whole bass issue.
Yeah, poor Jason Newsted. It's like his instrument just disappeared in the mix. But all this to say, Metallica was kind of hitting a ceiling with that sound.
Exactly. They needed to evolve,
Yeah.
and that's where Bob Rock enters the picture.
Okay, so Bob Rock. For those who maybe aren't familiar with the name, he'd produced Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, the cult bands with a heavier edge, sure, but also massive mainstream appeal.
Right. So bringing him in, that was a statement in itself. Metallica was signaling a shift.
Like, hey, world, we're about to do something different, and boy, did they. The Black Album sold over 30 million
Like
copies.
one of the best-selling albums of all time, period.
Crazy, right. But it wasn't just a case of, let's make a radio-friendly record.
No, they were smarter than that. Lars Ulrich, the drummer, he was very clear. They wanted shorter songs,
Yeah.
more direct, maximum impact.
So it was less about selling out and more about, strategic streamlining.
Exactly. They wanted to maintain that heaviness,
Yeah.
but deliver it in a way that just hits you right between the eyes. And Bob Rock's production style was key to that.
I've read he had them recording live in the studio, which was
Yeah.
different for them, right?
Huge difference. Before, it was all about layering tracks, meticulously building the songs piece by piece. This time, it was about capturing that raw live energy, like the four of them in a room, feeding off each other.
You can really hear that in the final result. There's this immediacy to it. You feel like you're right there with them.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about playing live, it was about simplifying things, too. Bob pushed them to strip away some of the complexity, focus on the core of each song.
So less about showcasing their technical skills and more about every note having a purpose.
Exactly. Think about a song like Sad But True. That main riff, it's so heavy, so powerful, but it's also so simple. It just pounds away at you, and it's incredibly effective.
And that carries through the whole album. It's heavy, but it's also catchy. You can headbang and sing along.
And that's what made the Black Album so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It bridged the gap between underground metal and mainstream rock.
It's like they took that raw power of their early stuff
Yeah.
and distilled it into something more refined, but even more potent at the same time.
It's like they took everything they'd learned and used it to create something totally new.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about how their own personal journeys played into it too.
What do you mean?
Well, they were all in their late 20s when they made this album.
Hmm.
They were maturing as musicians, but also as people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you hear that maturity in the music.
It's like they shed some of that youthful angst and embraced something deeper, more emotionally resonant.
Exactly. And that's evident not just in the lyrics, but in the music itself. There's more dynamic, more nuance, moments of quiet mixed with the thunderous riffs.
It's like they discovered a whole new range of emotions to express through their music.
And they weren't afraid to let those emotions show, which is part of what makes the Black Album so powerful, even all these years later.
It's interesting to think how that vulnerability might have been perceived by the metal community at the time, especially in the 80s. Metal was all about aggression, power, never showing weakness.
Oh yeah, it was a macho world.
Yeah.
And then here comes Metallica, one of the biggest metal bands, releasing Nothing Else Matters, a love ballad.
It was a bold move for sure. It shows how confident they were in their vision.
And they didn't lose an ounce of heaviness in the process.
It's like they were saying, we can be vulnerable and powerful, sensitive and savage.
Exactly. And that resonated with people. The Black Album became a touchstone for a whole generation who wanted more than just aggression from their music.
They wanted something that reflected the full range of human emotion, and Metallica delivered.
You know those recording sessions for the Black Album? They were pretty legendary.
Oh yeah, I've heard stories Bob Rock really pushed the band,
Yeah.
and they pushed right back.
Oh, absolutely. Bob was known for being demanding. And Metallica, well, they weren't exactly known for being laid back either.
It's like the Clash of the Titans, right? But
Uh,
sometimes that creative friction, that tension, it can produce something amazing.
Exactly. It's like forging steel. You need that heat, that pressure to create something strong and lasting.
I read that Bob insisted they play live in the studio together, which was
Wow.
a new thing for them, right?
Yeah, before it was all about layering tracks, meticulously building the songs piece by piece. But Bob, he wanted to capture that raw energy.
That live feel.
Exactly, like four guys in a room feeding off each other. And you can hear it in the final product, that immediacy. It's
Yeah.
like you're right there with them.
Totally. And it wasn't just playing live, it was also about simplifying their sound, right?
Right. Bob challenged them to strip away some of the complexity,
Yeah.
to focus on the core of each song.
So it was less about showing off their technical skills and more about just hitting you with the raw power of the music.
Exactly. Think of Sad but True.
Yeah.
That riff, it's so heavy, so powerful,
Yeah.
but it's also so simple, just pounds away at you.
And that simplicity, that focus on the groove, it runs through the entire album. It's heavy, but it's catchy.
And that's one of the things that made it so groundbreaking. It bridged the gap between underground metal and mainstream rock.
It's like they took the raw power of their earlier albums and made it even more potent by refining it.
It's like they took everything they'd learned over the years and channeled it into something completely new. And it's fascinating to think about how their own personal growth played into all of this too.
How so?
But think about it. They were all in their late 20s when they made this album. They were maturing as musicians, as people.
Right.
And that maturity,
Yeah.
it's reflected in the music.
It's like they shed some of that youthful angst and embraced something deeper,
Yeah.
more emotionally honest.
Exactly. And that shift, it's not just in the lyrics, it's in the music itself. The songs are more dynamic, more nuanced. You get those quiet moments mixed with the thunderous riffs.
It's like they discovered a whole new emotional palette and they weren't afraid to use it.
Yeah, and that willingness to be vulnerable, to let their guard down, it's part of what makes the Black Album so powerful.
It's interesting to think about how that vulnerability might have been perceived by the metal community at the time. Especially back in the 80s, metal was all about aggression, power,
Yeah.
never showing weakness.
Oh yeah, it was a very macho culture. And then here comes Metallica releasing a song like Nothing Else Matters, a straight-up love ballad.
It was a bold move, no question. It shows just how much they believed in their vision.
And the crazy thing is, they didn't lose any of their heaviness in the process.
It's like they were saying, hey, we can be vulnerable and powerful at the same time.
Exactly. And that message really resonated with people. The Black Album. It spoke to a whole generation who were looking for something more than just aggression from their music.
You were looking for music that reflected the full spectrum of human emotion, the good and the bad. And Metallica, they delivered.
It's wild to think this album came out over 30 years ago. And it still feels so relevant, so fresh.
It really does, you know? And I think part of that staying power is that it's an album that kind of grows with you. Like you can listen to it at different times in your life,
Yeah.
and you'll find new meanings, new layers.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like when I first heard the Black Album, I was a teenager. All I cared about was the energy, the riffs, that
Mhm.
raw power.
Right. It grabs you on a gut level. Yeah. But as I got older, I started to notice the other stuff. The lyrics, the emotion. It's an album that keeps giving.
And that's what makes a great album, right? Something that can speak to you in different ways throughout your life.
So where do you think the Black Album sits in Metallica's legacy? Is it their masterpiece? Or just one chapter in a much bigger story?
That's a tough one.
Mm.
I mean, some fans might say the earlier albums are purer, more true to their thrash roots.
Yeah, there's definitely a rawness to Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning that you don't quite get here.
But I think the Black Album represents a turning point for them. It's where they reached a new level of mastery. They blended their technical skills with their songwriting
Mhm.
and created something truly unique.
And its impact on the music world is undeniable. It brought metal to a much wider audience, inspired countless other bands.
Yeah, the Black Album didn't just change Metallica's career, it changed the landscape of heavy music.
It's funny though, right? An album this commercially successful, this embraced by the mainstream, and yet it was still so influential within metal, which is usually all about like rebellion and being anti-establishment.
It's a testament to the power of the music. The Black Album transcended genres. It spoke to something universal.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Black Album, what do you think is its most enduring legacy? What do you hope listeners take away from this?
I think it reminds us that evolution is essential for any artist. It's about not being afraid to experiment, to push boundaries, to take risks.
But it's also about staying true to yourself, to your artistic vision.
Exactly. Metallica didn't abandon their metal roots. They expanded on them, brought in new elements, and created something both familiar and completely fresh.
And that's a lesson for anyone, right? Don't be afraid to evolve, to grow, but always stay true to who you are. And hey, maybe you'll create something that impacts the world for decades to come. After all this talk about the Black Album, I think I might have to spin it again myself. What about you? What song from the Black Album do you think best captures this evolution we've been talking about? Hit us up on social media and let us know. Until next time, keep diving deep